Hello, welcome to the Toronto International Film Festival and to the Q&A recording for the Wavelengths Shorts program entitled Present Tense. My name is Andrea Picard and I'm the lead curator of Wavelengths, and it's my pleasure to be in conversation with Nicolás Pereda, Laida Lertxundi, Minjung Kim, Michael Robinson, and Peter Tscherkassky. Thank you all for your films and for your time today. So welcome, everyone.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi. The title of the program is Present, Tense, in that today is a very particular moment. Case in point that we're not all together as we normally are, but I think I probably subconsciously lifted some words from Michael's film and rewatching it. Present tense comes up a couple of times. All of the works are very disparate in some ways, formally, thematically, but many of them touch upon film history and also the liminal space between performance and representation. So I'm going to go through chronologically in the program and ask you all a couple of questions about your films. And Nico, you're first in the program with your film Dear Chantal, Querida Chantal. And I believe this film was a commission from the Punto de Vista Festival, who asked filmmakers to make homages to other filmmakers. And you, of course, chose Chantal Akerman. And I'd like to know why, what your affinity is, and how you came up with the concept of the apartment rental.
I mean, besides the fact that I was always very influenced by her work and I like her films a lot, I read the book that she wrote, that My Mother Laughs, recently, and I liked it a lot, and I liked that she has this strange relationship with Mexico because her mom would stay in Mexico because her sister lives there, and her mom seemed to dislike being there, and she kind of hated going, and there was something about the fact that Mexico is always seen as like this wonderful place to go, at least from the European perspective. Always when I'm there, it talks about how wonderful it would be to go to Mexico and this and that she writes about it in such a negative way, and she writes about a segment of that world that is really heavy to be in, that I recognize as well. And so I thought about her, like not wanting to stay with her family and then looking for an apartment and then being stuck with someone that recognizes her and her work. And I can imagine, I never met her, but I can imagine her being super annoyed at someone recognizing her in an email, like just trying to rent a place, and then a fan answering like, "Oh, wonderful, rent my place and I love your films." And so I tried to build something around that. It was a lot more in that vein when I started writing the text, and then it ended up being a lot more, I guess, serious in some ways, and a bit more influenced in her actual characters, I guess.
I mean, I was very lucky that I got to know Chantal quite well, and I worked with her, and I recognized her in the film. I mean, I think you got the tone very close to how she did approach certain things, but also her films are so much about the banal details that make up a person's life. But also very important to her work was letter writing, right? The epistolary form in all of her films. She's writing to a mother figure, a lover figure. Where did the letters come from?
I mean, it was kind of part of the commission, this idea of correspondence and the epistolary form. But strangely enough, the last film I saw in a movie theater before the pandemic was News from Home, which was screening here at the PFA in Berkeley, where I'm living right now. So I guess I like going to movies a lot, and maybe it stayed in my mind, and it's different to go to movies than to watch things on your computers. And so I guess it stayed with me for a while. And I've been thinking about kind of the epistolary form in general. So I don't know. It's a combination of her universe and the fact that I had just seen one of her films, I guess.
And I think it was so moving in that you kind of feel her spirit still alive in some ways. And
well, it is, I guess.
Yeah, of course it is. And through all of our watching and talking about it. So thank you. Laida, I'm going to turn to you now with your triptych of works, Inner and Outer Space. I'd like you to talk about the relationship between the trio, and we've come to affiliate your films with very Californian landscapes. And this is kind of a return to the Basque Country. So maybe if you can talk about that as a starting off point.
Yeah, thanks so much for including my film, and I'm really excited that's going to show in the cinema. So yeah, there was something for me about treading through this landscape that's my original landscape from my childhood, these mountains and the seascape, and something I know very well, but something that I haven't, tried to film before, and I wasn't in for a very long time. So it's both familiar and alienating at the same time. So I was already setting out, from that point, from that feeling, and then the pandemic happened as well. So, and we had quite a intense confinement in Spain, where there was like police outside, you can leave at all at the beginning. So I started working with these images from a cartoon that uses a lot of landscape, and I erased the characters. There were these gnomes, so they were very tiny in these sort of big landscapes. And I started because I couldn't go out and film, and I had all these plans for these things I wanted to do with people in the mountains and the sea. I started working with these virtual landscapes during that time. So once we were able to go out, it kind of became, both, it's like they're interacting with landscapes and they're also interacting with sets that are projected, and they're instead of in those virtual, cartoon landscapes. And for me, yeah, it was a lot to do with wanting to touch things and sort of be in certain places. Like my films are so much about location and sort of not being able to, or sort of, beginning to again after the confinement. And I guess the first question was about form. There's something, the last film I made, Autoficción, was more about being in this space with these women. And I feel like with this film, I got to go back to these more experimental, formal decisions that are about this kind of creating a narrative space and then really messing with the timeline of that. So there's kind of a centerpiece, and then it's as if there's these two wings to the sides, and it's really not hard to know what happened first. Like the two wings kind of come out of and all the images are sort of reshuffling, the same landscapes, and people are appearing in different ways in the three pieces. I don't know if I answered.
Yeah, but I like how you incorporate the production process too, because then it becomes about art making in a sense, and your relationship to, it's not only a negotiation between people and the landscape and interrelationships, but also the process of making the art.
Yeah, there's something, about also this kind of thinness of how you create that space. Like, what's this movie world, and they're kind of in and out of it. They touch images on paper, and then it turns into moving image, and they're back out. So it is very much this feeling of being in the studio and sort of having these ideas and then sort of making them happen instead of just kind of being completely immersed into something else. So I feel like it's sort of taking someone through the process of making it.
And then the final film is very immersive. Curious to hear more about that.
It was the first thing I was able to shoot. It was in May 2020 when we had been confined and we couldn't yet go to landscapes. So I just filmed images of the sea on the way to my studio, and then I projected the sea over those bodies. And I was really interested in the sea being projected on them. So it's kind of like the landscape is going through them. What I was talking about, the gnomes and the scale, like it's kind of this large new place instead of trying to explore it and feel very small in it. Maybe not having the same kind of feeling of dominion or something that you would have in LA of like owning, like you just kind of show up with your car and all these cameras and you can kind of take over a place. Like there's a kind of very different approach in these kind of mossy woods, you know, where you just get lost easily. And, you know, they haven't, that the iconography of it hasn't been documented over and over again, you know. So,
also, I think, you know, when we travel or we go to places, we feel the landscape in our bodies differently. And this is a very good transition to Minjung's film, The Red Filter is Withdrawn. You're in a very different kind of landscape, and one dealing with colonial ghosts and a lot of trauma. And this is Jeju Island. And I'm wondering why it is you wanted to confront that history today.
Yeah, I shot my film in Jeju Island. It's most famous vacation spot in Korea because it's beautiful scenery, and it also has a very tragic histories, including April 3rd incident, which happened between World War II and Korean War. And I was in artist residency for a while in 2018. And then I exposed to a lot of places, including some military bunkers you can see in the film. And then it was very ironic for me to see that the very famous vacation spot having a lot of, you know, that kind of stories inside. So that's how it starts there.
And there are two external references, one to Magritte, and then the most predominant one is to Hollis Frampton. And of course, the title of the work is taken from his lecture from 1968. So I'm wondering why it is that you used these filters in a way over that landscape, and how it helped to contextualize these either compositions or also its framing.
Two references. Yeah, I got the questions. And then first thing, Rene Magritte's painting, its name is Human Condition, is it offers a view from the outside of the cave, and it superimposed the canvas. So it says, I thought it says, what is the real world? So I always question by myself when I watching the film, and then when I shot the film, is it real world? And 내가 이 리얼 월드를 잘 보여줄 수 있는지에 대해서 계속 스스로에게 질문하는 경우가 많았어요.
There were many instances where I kept asking myself, will I be able to show the real world?
Yeah, 그래서 so I thought the painting, when I visit the first cave, military bunker in the film, and then so I thought I could have give the question whether which part is the real world and which part is not. And the second reference, Hollis Frampton's lecture is I love his films for a while, and then when I read lecture, it was very interesting for me for two reasons. The first one is he talked about the fundamental aspect of the filmmaking and then film projecting in the total darkness, and I love the kind of film materiality or projecting condition. And then, but also he used a red filter, to explain the film mechanism, and then lighting optical mechanism during the projection. Then I know he used red among the RGB, but red is very special meaning, especially in Korea, because it's separate. We have a separate country, and then I think it's not just for Korea. So worldwidely, people use red, some political aspect, right? So, so I thought it meets some history in Korea, especially in April 3rd incident, I think. Yeah.
And how has the film been received in Korea? I know you've shown it there already.
Some of the people noticed the art, it has, it's, I think especially for elders, they know that some of, they recognize some of military bunkers, but mostly people didn't recognize until the end. So when the credits show up, I showed all the list of the, you know, the locations, and then I kind of enjoy the mood. The people kind of a little bit shocked in the end, because it looked like just to show the, you know, landscape in Jeju Island, and people thought that, oh, where is it? I heard that people said that I wasn't sure where it is in Jeju. I've never visited there, even I visit there a lot, and then later they realized that it all has a tragic history in it. So yeah.
Moving on to Michael, also in terms of landscape and film history, Postcephaly in D. The film begins with a William Bronck poem, The World, which feels so apropos when you watch it, because the film is dealing with both, at least for me, the weight and beauty of the world, its chaos, its sense of drift, and the bonds that we provide each other with this foundation, but then how the earth can literally be pulled, literally and metaphorically pulled beneath our feet. And I'm wondering if you can talk about where this film comes from. There seems to be a swell of emotion that's both intimate, but also really expansive. And I guess in just living the year that we've had and thinking about global catastrophe, it's just, yeah, it's tremendously moving. And I'd love to hear you talk about the title and the choice of images and music. Mute.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's a bizarre thing to start talking about this film, because I feel like it's been a few years in the making and it's changed so much from where it began to where it's landing. And I think I started with just the sense of wanting to make something that felt like the past catching up to the present, both in terms of using my personal archive of sort of home movies and things I'd been collecting for a while, and media history, and then wanting to kind of equivocate personal history and media history. And this was all before the pandemic. And I think once that began, the film shifted a lot. And yeah, I mean, in terms of image choice, I sort of wanted everything under the sun to be in there. So, I mean, people who have maybe seen other films of mine, I usually bring together like a trio or a small grouping of different things and make them talk to each other. And this has maybe hundreds of different pieces in it, or different elements from, you know, appropriated sources. Yeah, so again, I think I really wanted, I think I wanted to sort of, rather than dance around sorrow and loss, I wanted to kind of grab it by the throat and look at it as a condition of existence, and sort of just use this film as a way to make sense of the weirdest, saddest years we've all lived through. So yeah, I feel like it's probably going to take me a while to know more succinctly what to say about it in that, you know, in a broader sense. The title, I think as I worked on the film, this idea of multi-headedness and sort of growing another self came the more I worked on it. The polycephaly is the condition of having more than one head, and polycephaly in D is sort of meant to be a reference to canon in D, or just a song in the key of D, which is a consonant sort of like uplifting key, allegedly. So yeah, I mean, I guess I wanted to think of it like thinking of sorrow and destruction as like a, not just a dark pit, but like a chance for shifting and a chance for growth, and maybe a more of a mutation than like a ascendant thing. So it's a really happy film, is what I'm saying.
But to counter that, there's also a feeling of desire, which I think is also resistance in some ways.
Yeah, yeah.
Can you talk about the
Sure.
telegraph sequences?
Yeah, those came about sort of in the middle of the process when I think I realized I wanted to not just have this endless dirge of montage, but have sort of break things up and structure it more within like conversation and questions. And I think originally I was going to have two sort of different characters meet each other in a motel pool. And then I realized it made more sense to have them telepathically talking to one another in different locations. And then I realized I wanted them to be the same person, sort of having a conversation with themselves. Yeah, I'm not sure what else I have to say about that at this point, but yeah, I mean, there is sort of, I mean, there's a kind of, I guess I wanted the conversation to feel somewhere between like a phone sex chat and a therapy session. And a lot of that language is sort of lodged in like wreckage and destruction. They're sort of going over the details of meeting and having this sort of erotic exchange in an earthquake. And I think, yeah, that sort of came out of this idea of looking at disaster as a chance for change, or at least wanting to.
Thank you. We end the program with a formal tour de force with Peter's Train Again. Peter, this is part of your Rushes series, and you're revisiting an earlier work. I'm wondering if you could tell us about that, and also the techniques that you've employed.
Let's start with the techniques. I make my films in the darkroom. I use raw footage, unexposed raw footage, and on top of that raw footage, I put my found footage. All of my films are made with found footage, including that one. In that case, I used something like 20, a little bit more than 20 different films. Anyway, and the found footage is being hand printed with tiny little light sources like flashlights, mainly flashlights in that case. Quite often I use laser pointer as well. And that gives me the opportunity to make kind of a moving collage by mixing in different sources, different found footages onto one single frame and the film strips, which I'm exposing. Everything is being hand processed, hand developed, and that film again is something like a farewell to classical analog cinema. As you know, the film has been premiered at the Cannes Film Festival, and it was the very only film at the whole festival which was shown on as a 35 millimeter print. I always say I try to make films which could not be made with a computer, just to show the possibilities which are still inherent in analog cinema and only in analog cinema, and that's the kind of beauty we are losing. As for the name Train Again, it refers to a film which I made some 20 years ago called L'Arrivée, which refers to the famous Lumière film, The Arrival of a Train at the station of La Ciudad. And this time I got some found footage, some rushes for a commercial, really badly filmed for a train company here in Austria. And it was so badly filmed that I decided I have to make something with the footage. And so I came up with the title Train Again, which in itself refers to Tree Again by Kurt Krenn, as you would say, I guess, who made one of the first serial films ever made in film history was Bäume im Herbst, Trees in Autumn. And 20 years later, he made a wonderful film called Tree Again. So the time difference is similar with the 20 years. So I said, let's make Train Again and take the opportunity to call it an homage to Kurt Krenn.
I mean, I have heard you say a number of times now that it's like a farewell to this analog tradition. but it's not a sad or sentimental one. I mean, the film is quite fun and energetic, and I don't know if you'd like to say a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, the fun factor is an important one to me. I try to keep things light, but not superficial. Yeah, I think superficial. Sorry. So yeah, and it's always something which I call physical cinema. I mean, it's a very unique experience which you have in cinema. I mean, Nico mentioned that before, that he likes to see films in the cinema and not on a monitor, which I totally agree. And calling it physical cinema means that I'm trying to set up something which in my darkroom techniques, which is extremely painstaking work and takes 2 years, in that case even 3 years, and it's meticulous, doing a little bit, and then it explodes on the screen, and takes you or takes the audience onto a ride, in that case a train ride, which really is quite an experience, even becoming physical in a way, but the impact. And that is something which also heavily relies on the experience of a regular cinema, as opposed to what you can get online or DVD or whatever.
Well, I'm glad we're having this conversation online, because I get to hear from each of you. And of course, I'm very pleased that we are showing all of your films in a cinema as well. And there will be more than 135mm print. There are always several formats and wavelengths, which is something that we are very dedicated to. And it's a very, it's a heavy program, but there are great moments of levity. And I really thank you all for participating and for these really great films. So thank you so much. And I hope to see you all in person sometime soon. Bye.